Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of the newly released book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. But we're here today to talk to the New York Times best-selling author of 1 Second After and many other books, William R. Forstchen. Book I have in my hand, The Final Day, a novel, a great read. Bill Forstchen, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Shalom, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Bill and I are almost close to the same age, and both have great love for history and for writing. He's an American author who began publishing in 1983 with the novel Ice Prophet. He's a professor of history and faculty fellow at Montreat College in Montreat, North Carolina. He received his doctorate from Purdue University with specializations in military history, the American Civil War, and the history of technology. He is the author of more than 40 books, including the award-winning We Look Like Men of War, a young adult novel about an African-American regiment that fought in the Battle of the Crater, which is based upon his doctoral dissertation. The 28th USCTS, Indiana's African Americans Go to War, 1863 to 1865. And the Lost Regiment series, which has been optioned by both Tom Cruise and M. Night Shyamalan. And I'm a fan of M. Night Shyamalan. Very interesting, amazing. First of all, that he's in every one of his movies, which most people don't know. He's always there, but he has such a unique view. It must have been very exciting to see this optioned and getting to know him.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's on hold at the moment. The main focus in my life in recent years has been the 1 Second After. It did drop several years back, but who knows what will come next.
Well, there you go. I have a book out, The Codist, and I've had so many conversations between here and Hollywood, and people saying we're interested, we're not interested, and talking about options, and I've learned the whole lingo of trying to create this, and it is a convoluted and complicated process. But one of the areas of expertise that you have, that you are kind of the go-to resource about, you talk about it in 1 Second Affair, are electromagnetic pulse weaponry, EMPs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of discussion about it, ranging from it's going to fry everything and you need to stock up on 50-gallon drums of dried oats and become a prepper because there's going to be nothing left of anything which has an electricity to it, to, well, if your car is not turned on, it'll turn on afterwards. If you have a pacemaker, well, sorry, you're going to die. There's just been so much spread about this that I don't think we understand. Maybe you can help our audience understand this whole concept and how it plays into what we think or project that North Korea is attempting to do or attempting to propose as being the threat of an EMP, as opposed to the Cold War mutual assured destruction scenario.
Okay. We'll have to go back to 1961-62 to start. But first of all, for those watching us today who are not really familiar with EMP, shorthand for electromagnetic pulse, it is generated by detonating a nuclear weapon about 200 miles out in space. Gamma ray burst coming off the bomb in that first microsecond starts separating electrons off of the nitrogen and oxygen in the very high upper atmosphere, sets up an electrostatic discharge, hits the Earth's surface, shorts out the power grid. Where do we first really learn about this? Back in the Cold War days of 61, 62, both we and the Soviets detonated a nuclear weapon out in space. Our test, your listeners can check it out. Just go on Wikipedia and pull up Starfish Prime or the Soviet test 184. And they went, whoa, major byproduct here. Power stations in Hawaii, 500 miles away from the point of detonation, were starting to short off. Same thing in the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan. Now, here's the reason for some of the confusion. Only a year later, we and the Soviets entered a test ban treaty, and we stopped detonating weapons on the surface or in space. So there has been question across the last 50 years, how bad could it get? All the modeling, and this is all declassified information, is dead on serious. 1 to 3, the worst case scenario was like North Korea, 3 relatively small nuclear weapons detonated over the United States. East Coast, Mid, West Coast will shut out the power grid. Now, sure, some people say, what will happen to my car? What will happen to my pacemaker? Frankly, some of your small electronics most likely will not be affected. It depends upon long wires absorbing that discharge, feeding into the grid, burning the wires off, shutting out what are called SCADAs and the transmission lines. But let's say 10% of the autos are short circuited. If you've ever been on the Beltway of DC, can you imagine 1% of the cars shorting? The other 99% are gridlocked. In short, the whole system starts to go offline. You lose your water supply, electrical distribution, food supply, medication, command and control. I base my novel on 2 studies done by Congress in '04 and '08, projected upwards of 90% of all Americans would perish post-EMP. So that's it, and as short a response as possible.
You know, it's such an interesting scenario. Now we saw the blackout New York City. We saw that
Yep.
grid go down. We also know that fundamentally that based on the way our grid is set up, substation interdependency transfers, a substation goes down and transfers the load to another substation. But if 2 substations within that grid go down and it transfers to the third one, it's the high likelihood that it will now collapse,
Cascade.
cascading effect, and therefore we have this inability to keep up with. And there have been many power grid impact events across the United States, but localized as opposed to regional. So it hasn't really been a topic of discussion. We say in the media our power grid is exposed. I came out of AT&T. AT&T's policy was we would build central offices where all the electronics were housed. We would have no windows, it would be solid concrete, and we wouldn't even put an identification on the building.
Right.
And all buildings would be modeled, styled architecturally after every other building in that neighborhood so that it would never stick out. Well, I don't know if you drive down the road today, you notice that every AT&T building has the AT&T name, and the neighborhoods have changed, but the central office has been there for 60 years. It's now completely out of place. It's like a big red flag that says we're the central office of the telecommunications system for AT&T. Now, we had things like strike duty back in the day where executives and managers had responsibilities. Had the union walked out, mine was central office security. Now, I'm a Jewish kid from Pittsburgh. Probably not highly likely that I would have been the best defender of central office under that kind of attack. But the EMPs that you're talking about, the outcome is chaos.
Yes.
It is a cutoff of communication, which is the essential key to chaos. When you cut off communications between troops, between forces which you have on the ground or in the air, you then have a sense of chaos because there is no national plan, or in most cases, there's no family plan.
You hit the point exactly. Since about 1860, we as a society, I said 1860 deliberately, we as a society have been used to somewhat instantaneous communication. 1863, Battle of Gettysburg. There were half a dozen reports a day coming from the nearest telegraphy stations. Look, consider this. Imagine if on 9/11 we saw those opening moments and then everything shut off. How different we would have reacted that day. We needed the voice of calmness. We needed the voice of leadership, of men like Rudy Giuliani saying, we're going to get through this. Now, consider a scenario where suddenly all communication just ceases. And beyond that, your lights are out, your cell phone isn't working, you can't reach your kids. Think about the chaos that would set in within a matter of hours. I know with my college students, if they're disconnected from the cell phone for more than an hour, they're in a near panic state.
Right.
But quite seriously, the command and control system of America goes offline. What happens then?
So do we have backup systems? Do we have any ability whatsoever to communicate? If you break this down, you're talking about wires and cables. So our infrastructure today is not underground, it's above ground. We have a certain amount that's moved underground. Would the underground facilities be as impacted as the above ground?
They could be just as seriously impacted because what's happening is that static buildup charge is not just bouncing off the Earth's surface, it's going for the iron magnetic core. And realize that the vast system we have, highly dependent on microwave, fiber optic connections, and also satellite links. In fact, as you and I talk on Skype, it could very well be that our signal's being bounced out to a satellite and back. All of that goes offline. Now, some folks ask, where did 90% fatality rate come from? Again, I took those from declassified congressional reports. You can find them online. Just look up Congressional Report EMP. All right, you're in Birmingham right now, are you not?
I am.
Rabbi, yeah. Where does Birmingham get its water from? Yeah.
It's a good question. We get it from the...
It is. It is for all of us. We don't even think about where our water supply comes from, or when we take the shower in the morning and we use the bathroom and the wastewater goes out, we don't think where it goes. Our food supply, average community only has about 20 days worth of food on hand, from what's in your fridge to the truck backing into the supermarket. Your pharmacy, gone are the days that you and I knew as kids where you walked in the pharmacy and you had a big room in the back, could even mix medications for us. It's now all FedEx. Have you noticed when your FedEx delivery comes up, the guy has a little handheld computer, punches in, the thing is delivered, it's all tied into computers. You pull up to buy gas. Suppose the credit card no longer works. Mm-hmm. How do you buy gas? All of these things cascading together start to create a societal breakdown.
So when we look at the outcropping of Hollywood with some of the TV series, Lost, Survivor,
don't take me there.
These crazy scenarios of people migrating and finding themselves in collective communities and being able to gather and come together. America's 375 million people, 10% left is still 37 million, but scattered across the geography that's the size of the continent of Europe, with no way to communicate. What happens then to society? What happens to the surviving humanity? And if is it localized? Is it the United States? Would South America be able to come to our rescue? Would Europe be able to deploy resources? Would the Asia Pacific region be able to get supplies to us? Or would we be in a desperate situation?
One, a strike on the continental United States that took our grid down from coast to coast creates a power vacuum within the United States. Overseas military assets, our boomers carrying nukes, they're still out there. But picture the global chaos if suddenly we are essentially off the playing field for weeks, months, maybe years. Would our neighbors come to help us? I'm not going to hold my breath. Um, I have great trust in our wonderful allies, England. We've come to their aid twice. I could picture them coming to help us. But suppose Europe is impacted by an EMP as well. In my novel, 1 Second After, I presented the scenario, yeah, Red China might come to help after 6 months with 500,000 troops to supposedly wear blue helmets and then stay here for the next 50 years. We'd be on our own, especially if you're not near a coastal area where supplies might possibly come in months later. All of us will be on our own. Now, you referenced Hollywood. Don't get me started on that because I have yet to see an accurate presentation. Whatever Hollywood produces regarding EMP is trash.
Well, but see, I want you to go.
Establish a religion nor interfere with the free practice thereof. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. There's no comment about
I
separation
know.
of church and state.
There's two things I keep by my side.
I love
Okay?
this.
Two
Yes.
things: the Bible, right,
Mm-hmm.
and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. The two most referred to documents, in my opinion, that establish all other documents that exist. And
Right.
so they're by my side all the time. I have a miniature copy that's in my backpack. I have one in my glove compartment. I have one in my bedside stand.
And
And I
my
know,
students better have copies too.
right? And unfortunately, I talk to law school professors that say that they're no longer teaching the Constitution. They're only teaching the Supreme Court decisions about the Constitution. I said, then you need to change universities. You need to change curriculum because the Constitution is the foundation of America and these things we're talking about. We're talking with Bill Forstchen, William R. Forstchen, known in the literary world, author of The Final Day, and so many other great best-selling novels, historical, factual. The one thing people don't understand about novels is there are the science fiction novels. Those are the creative minds that go beyond the natural into the supernatural and take you out 100 years, 150 years, 250 years, and they create this model of what dystopia is, these magical, mystical, flying worlds. your novels are based in the reality of the day, of the potential for the scenarios that we are facing, but yet we are woefully ignorant of. And this is what makes them so compelling to me and to many of your readers. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to explore even more about EMPs. We're going to talk about North Korea. We're going to talk about the uranium one. We're going to talk about the global impact of nuclear proliferation, and then we're going to slip in my concept of the weaponization of DNA, which is a whole other subject. You're not prepared yet, but I want you to think about that, because that's my area, is weaponized DNA. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with best-selling novelist William R. Forstchen. I'm holding in my hand The Final Day, a novel, but he has written so many, over 40 books, and he is a history professor professor of history and faculty fellow at Montreat College in Montreat, North Carolina, talking at a faith-based university about the Constitution, about your Bill of Rights, about America, the things that are being discussed every day in the news that the average American is woefully ignorant about. I'm an immigrant kid, so you know, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, they're foundations of what we know, what we left to come to, so we would have an appreciation of it. So it's a part of my heritage in history because I was born on American soil. I'm the only male in my family born in this country. So because of that, it has a great deal of personal meaning to me. You and I were talking about EMPs. North Korea is in the news a lot. China's in the news a lot. The Uranium One deal is now popping up its head again. What is the impact of all of this posturing? And I want to look at it on two levels. First is geopolitical, and second, because you do have a mastery of the Bible, how this lines up from a prophetic standpoint, if you're willing to go there to see how we wind up, how we get to where we're going to have to get to ultimately.
You and I are the same generation. We grew up during the Cold War.
Yes.
What deterred Armageddon was something called MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction. What it comes down to is if the Soviets did a full launch on us, enough of our nuclear capability would survive that we could retaliate, nobody wins. MAD worked because they had as much to lose as we did, and I half seriously say, thank heavens they might have been atheists because they wanted to inherit a functioning world. Nuclear wasteland, no. MAD does not necessarily work when you're dealing with rogue regimes in North Korea and Iran. North Korea, come on, obviously it's a psychotic run country. Iran, driven by a fanatical form of Shiite Twelvers, who might very well see the ultimate destruction as their fulfillment of the return of the prophet, well, Muhammad. And what's really weird is they actually teach that Christ would return on their side because they see him simply as another prophet.
Yes.
North Korea, we're dealing with complete instability. And across 25 years, we have been kicking the can down the road in terms of allowing them to achieve nuclear capability. Very disturbing report by Defense Intelligence Agency only several months ago that radically increased the number of warheads they have. A year ago, we were hearing maybe 5 or 10. Now they're saying 60. A year ago, they might barely have intermediate range ballistic missiles. Now they have intercontinental. We've been kicking the can down the road for too long, and now we're facing the wall. And I always like to try and add, when you talk about North Korea, it's a metaphor for Iran. What we have allowed to happen with Iran, where we're actually shipping them billions of dollars in hard currency, what do you think they're spending that money on? We are in a very dangerous position. And yes, it does link in to quite a few points of biblical prophecy.
The United States population act more like lemmings than any people group that I know in Europe or Asia or in Africa. Uh, we act as if we're under a dictatorship because we don't stand up for what we believe. I did an op-ed entitled "Shock and Awe, We Let It Happen."
Mm-hmm.
The word casting couch came into our vocabulary in 1937. 80 years
Yes.
ago, the term casting couch, there's not a single human adult that I know that doesn't know what that means, but nobody said a word about it. And all of a sudden now one person has hundreds of accusations about using the casting couch, but we allowed it to become commonplace when it was prostitution, it was sexual abuse, it was human trafficking. But we didn't care because it wasn't called prostitution, it wasn't called sin, it wasn't called human trafficking, it was called the casting couch. And so it had a
Yeah.
nice, comfortable name to it, and we bought into it, and we let it happen, and there was no outcry. Now there's all this outcry, and we're in shock over these horrible behaviors, but it's 80 years that they've been talking about it. 80 years since it appeared in.
Losing your signal a little bit, and even as we talk, I have a military helicopter coming right over my house. So they're
Yes,
practicing exercises up in these mountains.
you know,
So could you repeat what you had just said in the last 30 seconds?
yes, that we allowed this behavior because the term casting couch has been in use since it appeared in Variety magazine in 1937.
Right.
80 years. The problems that we have from a military perspective, our military is not capable of even the same capability of Israel of being able to have a defense system that could take a missile out of commission in flight. Okay? And we publicize that. I'm trying to wrap my mind around why our naval officers and why our military is willing to go on record and saying if North Korea launched an ICBM right now, would we be able to intercept it and stop it? And the military's response is probably not.
There's 2 points in which a missile can be intercepted. We have approximately 50 ABMs, anti-ballistic missiles, on the West Coast only,
Right.
in which unclassified information is a success probability of only about 50%. The second way of stopping it is being parked off the coast with Aegis missile capability to intercept their launch as it's lofting. During the loft stage, when it has a big heat signature, it's easy to track. Let me point out one example. 'You hear gunfire from your neighbor's house. You look over the fence. He has a picture of you and your family. He's screaming obscenities and he's putting bullets into an image of you and screaming that he's going to do it. Do you take that seriously?
Of course.
Or do you run and hide? That's what we have been doing for decades. We run and hide rather than confront it when it should have been confronted in the beginning. Ten minutes. How many? I had a student who disappeared into that gulag after Khomeini took power. He could have been stopped easy on by Jimmy Carter in the 70s.
Yes.
Millions of people have died because the world set back, let the Ayatollah take control of Iran. War gets triggered, well, with another psychotic, Saddam Hussein. And terrorism, that's when terrorism really exploded on the world.
You know,
And again,
and what's
kick it down the
interesting,
road.
you being a historian know that the first Shah was a Nazi sympathizer
Yes.
and changed the name from Persia to Iran, which in Arabic means Aryan, which is for the purposes of ethnic cleansing. They wanted the perfect race of Shiite Muslims. They wanted to cleanse themselves of the Jews. They wanted to cleanse themselves of the Christians, cleanse themselves of the Sunnis, and make it a full-blown Shiite regime. Then we come along and we have the weakest president in the history of humanity, who has the international ability of a peanut.
Well, we're talking Jimmy Carter, but we see another one with the last administration as well. But
identical.
yeah,
They were identical. I actually referred to John Kerry as Lurch. You remember from the television
oh,
show.
don't insert Lurch. I rather like. I'm 6'5", and that was my student nickname when I was a kid.
Okay,
I looked like Lurch.
but he went on the apology tour. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Madonna went on her tour. He went on his apology tour, and international relations. We became the laughingstock of the world. But from the time of Ronald Reagan, who brought our military back up to a standard, we have eroded over 75% from that time, from the 80s to the present time. So over a period of 35 years, we have depleted by almost 75% our military capabilities. And yet people don't realize that we have more enemies, armed enemies in the world today than we had in World War II.
We have nuclear capable enemies.
Yes.
And even as we talked about a few minutes ago with mutual assured destruction regarding the Soviets, that might have worked. It would even work against China. We have complete rogues with that capability now. Okay, a historical question. At the end of World War II, Adolf Hitler did have the capability to launch massive chemical attacks in a dying spasm. Why did he not do it? Because we conveyed a counterforce measure back to them. We will drench Germany from one end to the other in chemical weapons if you push the button. Not even Hitler would dare that. But what about the Ayatollahs running Iran right now? And again, what about the ruler of North Korea? 3 generations of psychosis.
And didn't we turn around and demonstrate that capability in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam?
Tragically, yes.
We did layer a country with napalm and Agent Orange,
right,
as a way of taking on this enemy, which was a point and a turning point. It was a point in the point to me as a young man was, if the French are in it, we need nothing to do with it. That became my standard from 1968 on. Hey, if the French are in it, I vote against it completely. We don't need to be in any alliance with them. I can see a whole history of hundreds of years of every time we come to the aid of France, we wind up paying the bill. We wind up, and they're eating croissants and brie, and we're the ones paying the freight. So
I rather like croissants and brie, but we won't go there.
So, you know, when it comes to that, I have an attitude. But now we have rogue regimes in North Korea. We have rogue organizations all affiliated by a common Quran but a different application. So Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra and Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS and the list goes on are advancing through immigration, migration, and jihad, both sociological jihad and war jihad, and we're watching parts of Africa fall at an alarming rate. We've watched the biblical 12 nations move into the 55 nation range with an advancement of an agenda of now sweeping Europe. There's only one last stronghold, and that is us in the West. And it is on everybody's radar that it's coming here, but nobody's doing anything about it.
Political correctness.
That's
Two words.
That's
sums it all up.
Yeah, that's going to be our undoing.
Political correctness, which has strangled almost everyone with the fear to speak what they truly believe and what they see. I made a deliberate choice when I left graduate school. I was at Purdue. I had a great education there, but I saw a lot of issues of political correctness. And when Montreat opened the position with the statement, the opportunity to combine faith with learning, I jumped on it. Small Christian colleges are really the last bastion of true intellectual freedom in this country. I can speak openly and freely in my class. I can't in the public forum.
When we look at this response to North Korea,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to come. It's almost reaching its tipping point.
All projections are within 6 months.
We're
in the countdown now.
We are in a countdown now. So we are going to have to make a strike on North Korea in order to eliminate the nuclear capability, unless it's unleashed on us first.
What you're talking about is preemptive first strike.
Yes.
Throughout our military, let's look at the two worst moments. Pearl Harbor, 1941. We had now, I do not for a moment buy into the conspiracy that we knew we were going to be hit at Pearl Harbor. All we did know was war would start with Japan sometime in December, but across that vast arc of the Pacific, it could have been anywhere. We were caught by surprise. A fair part of our Pacific fleet was destroyed, but we were able to absorb that blow, come back, and only 44 months later, we had a 1,000-ship armada anchored in Tokyo Bay. Even 9/11, a horrific blow, but whether people agree or not, we did come back. A EMP is a preemptive first strike that the war ends in 1 second. We are hit by an EMP, the war is already over. I had a character in my novel, and it is a novel, but it's a study of what would happen in a typical town across 1 year. Towards the end of the book, word comes in from the outside, yeah, these guys did it, and we turned their country into glass, to which my main character responds, does that change what's happening to us here? Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter anymore. We cannot absorb an EMP and come back as a stronger, better America united together. We have lost the war in the first second. The only answer left is diplomacy that can disarm, but that's not working, or ultimately, this is the hard choice, preemptive first strike to destroy their capability to destroy us.
So in this scenario, if I understand correctly the technology, we can drop a nuclear weapon and contain the impact of it to a predictable geography.
Difficult.
But we know the range.
Yes. The difficulty is, if you look at the map with North Korea, you have China, you have Russia, South Korea, Japan, that if any weapon is ground burst, the fallout comes from the debris that's pulled up in a ground burst weapon. Whichever way the wind is blowing, either good allies, right, Japan and South Korea get it, or Russia and China, and then all bets are.
An EMP would have an even more broad much more
Yes.
devastating effect because it would encompass all of that and more.
Yes. An
So,
EMP is a line of sight event that, again, the three weapons scenario that we talked about earlier, East Coast, Central United States, West Coast, the EMP effect can lay down for hundreds of miles beyond where the weapon is detonated. Now, there's no actual direct physical destruction on the ground in that first second. It's just the grid goes off. But here's a number to think about even with that. As you and I are talking, there's approximately 5,000 commercial airlines crisscrossing the United States. A fair percentage of them would short off with their glass cockpits. The plane would become unflyable, whether you had Sully up front or not. If the computer control systems in the plane fry off, that plane becomes a rock. Estimates, several 100,000 people would die in the first minute just from airplane disasters. This is entirely different than what we experienced on 9/11.
right. So what is the weapon that we could use on North Korea that would target and maximize result, minimize loss of life?
You were asking a very tough question. One, I pray we would have to stay, and I pray we would stay conventional. Their primary test facility and weapon launch facilities would be vulnerable to conventional strike. It would have to be successful within the first 2 to 3 hours because North Korea has positioned enough munitions and launch capability to pretty well destroy most of Seoul. Estimates I saw in a report recently, 30,000 casualties in the city of Seoul on the first day of a war. We would have to take that capability out as well. We're in a very tough paradigm at this moment. The other hope for would there be a way to, shall we say, institute regime change with extreme prejudice? That would be the other way.
And that's what's puzzled me is why we have not used that strategy. Is it because our intelligence community has really eroded to the point that I believe that it has, where
Yes.
our operatives are no longer capable, that the leading intelligence agency in the world might be Mossad, and no longer the CIA, no longer MI6. Mossad has taken over in this role and in this leadership position. You know, are we capable of carrying out an assassination or regime change with our current intelligence community?
Well, one, assassination by Western definition is illegal according to the rules of war.
Of course.
Got an issue there. Second, you're talking about a true Stalinist with the ruler there. Any person who makes a move against him, the family is eliminated out to second cousin. I mean, think about that. Let's say one of my wacky second cousins out there does something, they come and shoot me at the end of the day. He has such a firm control on dissent and also Orwellian-like intelligence gathering. You're talking about a very difficult gray area of warfare when it comes to trying to regime change in North Korea.
So economic pressure from China, which they
Not
say
working.
they say they will do, but they're not doing. Because
Well,
they're-
it's
they're-
to the benefit of the Chinese to see it's all tied up on this issue.
Right. It's a difficult situation. And
That's an understatement, sir.
and unfortunately, you and I have run out of time, but this has been delightful, and it's been such a pleasure and honor to meet you and spend
Thank
this
you.
hour with you. William Forstchen, novelist extraordinaire, The Final Day, many, many, many other great books. Find him on the web, William R. Forstchen, Forstchen, a great novelist, historian, great friend of Newt Gingrich, co-author with Newt Gingrich on many of his works, and someone that you can hear common sense, faith-based, clarity, willing to speak out. We thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
God bless you, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.